organized by ICOAC, Vijay Krishna Girls College, Howrah, in collaboration with West Bengal Biodiversity. Now we are going to start our second session with some more new events. At first, the abstract book will be inaugurated virtually through sharing screen by our respected principal, Dr. Ruma Bhattacharya, along with honorable invited speakers, IQA coordinators, and organizing committee. All of them are requested to turn on video and audio at time of screen sharing. After the inauguration, e-abstract book will be posted both of the Telegram group as PDF version. I am requesting to Dr. Amit Majumdar to take some screenshot while sharing the screen. Ma'am, please sharing.
Okay, I'm going to share it first. Let us do this. Can you see it? Just a minute. No, एक minute. Just a minute. Share screen. Yes. Can you see it?
Yes.
Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Acha, okay. So this is a joint effort under the aegis of IQAC of Vijay Krishna Girls College, Howrah. What we have done here basically is we are trying to boost up the mood under pandemic, and we have been requesting all our participants, teachers, research scholars, and students of undergraduate classes to write something so that they can present, and we are giving this opportunity to them to publish it also. This is the first book that is coming out. I should not say book, it is a e-abstract book, and what we are going to do here, this is the theme of the webinar is here, and then we have a principal's address, that's okay, and then we have the list of joint conveners and organizing committee who have been working very hard for this e-abstract publication. And then we have the number of papers that we have received, and you can see that the number is quite high. It is 183, and it's all in different subjects, different disciplines, and everything. So this is e-abstract. And the one more thing I want to say about this is that selected papers for students, UT students, research scholars, students, everyone, selected papers will be published in, we have a BKGC Scholar Journal, BKGC Scholar. The selected papers, full length papers will be published in this BKGC Scholar, and selected papers of teachers will also be published in our college journal, and everyone will be intimated about these things shortly after a few days within the after today, few days after today, the procedure and everything will be intimated. So this is a very happy occasion for us, and I think this is a novel endeavor on part of Vijay Krishna Girls College team who are organizing this webinar, because it takes a lot of hard work to bring out an abstract on the day of the seminar. We have been doing this kind of thing for the last 5 years, but in a webinar, this is the first time we are doing it in a webinar. So I want all your best wishes so that we can keep on doing this kind of work. Thank you. Vidya.
Thank you all. Again, I am requesting to Principal Ma'am to share the objective of today's session and welcome our honorable speakers. Over to Principal Ma'am.
Okay. So good afternoon and good morning as well. This is the second day of the multidisciplinary international webinar, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development in Human Welfare, organized by Internal Quality Assurance Cell of our college. And I must say the first, yesterday was also a lovely experience, and I know today will be even better.
Ma'am, some other is sharing the screen. Okay, it's okay now.
Is it okay? Okay. Am I sharing the screen till now?
No, some other one is sharing the screen.
Oh, stop sharing, please. Please do not share. Please keep your
some
microphone and
some
your
from the panelist. Some from the panelist is sharing.
panelist.
কারুর মানে একটা অন হয়ে গেছে, একটু দেখে অফ মনে হচ্ছে আমার।
Okay. Okay, let me continue.
It's okay.
Today we have three very distinguished speakers. We start with Professor Ajitabu Rai Choudhury, Professor, Department of Economics, Jadavpur University. Very, very well-known academician in the field of economics. And I must mention here that I have been fortunate enough to be a student of his in his first batch. In his first batch when he started his teaching in Jadavpur University. And till date, I think he is the best teacher ever I have had and I have seen around me. So, sir, a big welcome to you. And thank you for being with us today here. Then we have Dr. Shannal, Chairman, West Bengal Biodiversity Board, Government of West Bengal. Dr. Shannal has helped us immensely in collaborating with us, in allowing this collaboration. He has been with us entire yesterday, and he is here today. And today we are going to listen to his erudite lecture on the topic. We have also with us Dr. Monomita Nandi from Brunel University. Monomita Nandi, Dr. Nandi has been with us for a webinar in economics. So we also have been acquainted before, and and we really enjoyed her lecture in the last webinar. So I know we are all going to enjoy it today and learn a lot from all these lectures. And with her, we have two research scholars, Ms. Lee Roberts and Ms. Jaskaran Kaur, both research scholars at Brunel University, London. I welcome them also. I welcome all the participants and all my students who are with us today here for this webinar. This is going to be a very learning process. I'll just say a very few words regarding the topic of the webinar. The 2030 agenda of sustainable development, as it was adopted by about I think 193 member states in the United Nations, was a very had a very ambitious target, because they actually wanted to address a very wide range of global societal challenges. Now, we all know that nearly half of world's population is directly dependent on natural resources for their livelihoods. Mostly the vulnerable ones. They depend directly on biodiversity to fulfill their daily subsistence needs. Biodiversity is also at the center of many economic activities, including those related to agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and nowadays tourism. There is a very deep link between biodiversity and human development, and we cannot think of human development ignoring the wide scale of biodiversity. So under such circumstances, against this backdrop, the goals set by the sustainable development, as I said before, I'll just mention 2 or 3 goals. One is end poverty in all its forms everywhere. So in developing countries, millions of people are directly or indirectly employed agriculture, fishery, as I said before. So biodiversity provides resource and income to this entire set of people. So improvement, how to improve this phase, this chapter is a very important concern. Related to it, the other second goal I would say was end hunger. End hunger and achieve food security and improved nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Once again, I must say that for sustainable agriculture, special attention need to be given to biodiversity as for soil quality, for water quality. These things are very much important for proper agricultural productivity. So this is something that is also of big concern. Another goal which I always like to bring in every aspects of economics is that to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls too, and make them and recognize women's roles as key land and natural resource managers, so as to improve the process of development, so that they can be a part of development, and development process can take the benefit of them being a part of it. Right at this moment, standing now, I think the most important issue would be the health issue. And this pandemic has shown us that we are really not at all prepared for any blow from nature. This pandemic and then the Amphan came, and we saw that we are just mere puppets in the hands of nature, and it has also shown us the fragility of the healthcare system, not just in India, everywhere. When New York was hit first, we have seen how they suffered, because they were not, we consider America to be the most developed nation, but we've seen that their healthcare system also buckled under this attack of this invisible enemy. So COVID-19 has been a very I should say shocking new experience, which, and standing here we have to make a choice between safe living and safe future. So economics is always all about choice. So how do we make a choice between safe living and safe future? What kind of policies should be adopted? What kind of measures should be taken, whether short term or long term? This is what we are all going to hear in the technical session today. And I know everyone, all of us, will be learning a lot from these sessions. Thank you, Bidyadhar. I think our first speaker is Professor Rajat. Thank you, Bidyadhar.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable speech. An important announcement for all of you. Feedback link will be shared nearly end of the webinar. All registered participants are requested to fill and submit within 1 hour of the link given to get e-certificate. After that, the link will be inactivated. Also, an humble request to all of you: do not use chat box for self-introduction. Only write your queries in the chat box. Now, I am requesting to Dr. Shavani Chatterjee, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, to proceed the next part of the webinar. Over to Shavani.
Thank you, Bidyadhar. It is my proud privilege to introduce Professor Ajitavo Raychaudhuri to all of you. On behalf of IQAC of Vijay Krishna Girls College, I welcome you, sir. Professor Raychaudhuri has received his PhD from American University, USA. He is professor and former head and coordinator of Center for Advanced Studies, Department of Economics, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. He was a senior Fulbright scholar at Economic Growth Center, Yale University in 1996-97, and Red Hall Scholar in Residence of Columbia University, Paris campus in 2007. He was visiting faculty at Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta, Calcutta University, and Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Calcutta. He had undertaken several important projects from UNICEF, ADB, World Bank, UNDP, GDN, Finance Commission, Planning Commission, etc. He has also written numerous papers in international and national journals and edited books. Among his notable books are India's Exports, an analytical study with Professor Sugata Marjit, published by Oxford University Press, and International Trade in Services in India, Implications for Growth and Inequality in a Globalizing World, with Professor Probir De, also published from Oxford University Press. He also authored two books. One is District Human Development Reports for West Bengal with Professor Sushil Haldar, published by UNDP and Planning Commission of India. His latest edited book is with Professor Probir De on Myanmar's integration with the world, published as Palgrave Macmillan series by Springer. Under his supervision, many research scholars have obtained their PhD degrees. He is the life member of Indian Econometric Society and Bengal Economic Association. His today's presentation is on post-COVID-19 economic recovery, how to have a sustainable path for Indian economy. Now, I would like to request Professor Raichaudhuri to take the charge of this session. Over to you, sir.
Sir.
Sir, please unmute.
Sir.
স্যার আপনি আনমিউট আছেন, এই মিউট আছেন।
স্যার আপনাকে একটু আনমিউট করতে হবে।
I am very thankful to the Vijay Krishna Girls College and the very generous introduction which you had for me. And I congratulate the college authorities for hosting this webinar, which is a very important topic today. And I must confess that, Ruma had a lot of things to say about biodiversity, sustainable development, and economic activities. Being an economist, and I have a comparative advantage. I have an advantage in talking about economic issues. And frankly speaking, I am not a very specialist on ecological or health issues. But as you know that the current scenario of COVID-19, which we are all facing all over the world, it started with a health contagion. It started maybe in China, then spread all across the world, and it was a contagion, and basically a health contagion. But what happened later on, this contagion ultimately transformed itself into an economic contagion, kind of a disaster, economic disaster for so many economies. And it's not only as we always think that the developing countries are hard hit, but this case, the developed world, including the most important economic power, if we say that, United States was devastated. The European Union, if we look at that, many of these countries were simply battling with the COVID crisis. And then it spread to other parts of the world. And basically it did not start in India for that matter, but we had to bear the brunt. And as we know, in most of the cases, it traveled through people traveling from the affected areas to the other non-affected areas, and contagion spreads like that always, and it's pandemic now. Now, what is important in this case is that all of us know that in order to tackle this pandemic from affecting more lives, spread, in a devastating form, most of the countries has adopted one particular approach. We hear about social distancing and others. But the main approach which was taken is lockdown. Lockdown is something where simply you have all shutters of economic activities down. So naturally that has a big sustainable issue, that if you completely lock down the economy, what will happen to the sustainability of human beings? Human beings must sustain if they have enough purchasing power to buy the necessities of life and sustain themselves. And when all the economic activities were shut down, you face this simple problem. Those, especially the daily laborers in an economy who survive on this, if they work daily, they earn. If they don't work, they don't earn. Naturally, what happened in a country like India, and that's not so much in developed countries, there what happened, no doubt people lost their jobs. So many people had to fall back upon the government for some kind of transfer, subsidies, support, whatever you call it. India is no exception to that, but we have a special character, which I would say is very special to South Asian economies, countries, that we have a large informal sector. We have almost like more than 80% people involved what we call unorganized sector. The characteristic difference of organized and unorganized sector, there are many, but I would really highlight the most important in this case of sustainability issues which you are talking about, is that informal sector or informal workers do not have social security. You do not have a social security which is universal, which supports these informal workers. So if they lose their jobs, they lose their security too. Informal sector jobs, at least you have a piece of paper, which is a legal paper, which gives you some kind of workers' rights, as well as rights to your future life, in the sense that when you retire, you get some benefits. In unorganized sector, most of the workers there are daily workers. They don't have anything, neither the social security currently, nor there is any guarantee that what will happen when they say retire and they have to sustain in some way or other. So that's very special in South Asian economies. You don't find the other economies, some African economies are notwithstanding. The Indian economy and most of the South Asian economies, huge informal sector. I will come back to that in a moment, that what's the importance of this informal sector and why the economy has to depend on this informal sector in some way or other. Or rather, I would say the system wants the informal economy to survive. They really don't want the informal economy to die. They want the informal economy to stay there for some specific reasons which I will come. So my question is this, that given the scenario that in the initial few months, we have almost complete lockdown, then we know that slowly we are unlocking, with some sectors are given permission to work. What exactly is this scenario? That initially what we did, in fact, in the lockdown period, as well as when we are unlocking now, we largely tried to let the agricultural sector work. If you look at the scenario, most of the agricultural activities were allowed within 15 days of lockdown. So agricultural workers were allowed to start work. Agricultural services started working. So agriculture was given some kind of a relief from the very beginning. But look at the other sectors, the manufacturing sector and the services sector. And I, in fact, place more importance to manufacturing for a special reason. As you know, if you look at the national cake, which we call the GDP, it's a big cake which we share among ourselves. The national cake of the GDP already was slowing down in the last year. It was supposed to grow at the rate of 7%. We found it grew at the rate of 4%. So there was disappointment already in various sectors of the economy. People were already hard hit, especially the daily workers, as well as many of you know that even within the organized sector, casualization has gone up like anything. Instead of permanent workers, the organized industry has gone for casualization, casual workers who have very specific duties. And I don't find much difference of casual workers with daily workers, except that they might have a time limit in which they work, and they might have a piece of paper as well that you are employed for so many days or something. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the manufacturing sector, which may be largely unorganized, as well as some parts of the manufacturing sector, which we call large industries, all of them were really crying for help even before the COVID came. You hear about auto industry saying, we have so much unsold stocks. So they were already cutting their labor force. That happened in some other sectors. So naturally you have steel industry, you have textile industry, you have engineering sectors, you have electronics. Everywhere the story was, we are not finding enough buyers. So we are piling up stocks. So we cannot maintain the workforce the way we did. And as you know, the workforce are either daily or casual, most of them. So what happened? This started before COVID came. So when the COVID came, that really gave a body blow to this already declining scenario in the economy. And so people were already under some kind of a very uncertain future. So when the COVID came and the whole manufacturing activity was shut down, and as I will try to say, we talk about services. Remember, out of 100 rupees which we earn, 65 rupees comes almost from service sector. But remember, services has two components. One type of component survives for its sustainability on manufacturing. If manufacturing, small, medium, large, if they do not produce, what will happen to transportation? What will happen to repair service? What will happen to retail sales? What will happen to maintenance, finance, accounting, you name it. So the employment which is generated and output generated in services sector, I would prefer to say, or rather venture to say, maybe half of them depends on manufacturing. So manufacturing has a twin role in itself, manufacturing, as well as to sustain the service sector. So remember the holistic scenario. When the manufacturing is down, the service sector, half of them may be down, and altogether we have a scenario where sustainability of common man is in serious question. So what happened? And I will go to the post-COVID in a moment. What happened then? Once because post-COVID, COVID doesn't make much sense. I do not know when the COVID will end. So post really means something finished, and then we go to the next part. But we don't know when the COVID will be over. So it's a continuing saga. So if I say post-COVID, misnomer, but let me try to say that the initial phase of COVID, and then how the economy is trying to recover as the COVID may be to a certain extent loses its steam. What's happening then? So if I go by that, the initial part, so that people at least survive, was to boost up the manufacturing sector in some way or other. Agriculture was largely left out, but manufacturing, remember in agricultural sector also, the major part of income is earned not by agricultural activities nowadays. 45% people live in rural areas, but most of them earn their living by non-farm activities, either by sales, repair, some kind of service they are performing, some kind of manufacturing they are doing. So altogether, I would place tremendous weight on manufacturing. Out of manufacturing, the small and medium, in fact, they are the ones who create jobs. I would say among the total job creation, if you look at it, maybe 40% of this job creation depends on the manufacturing sector. In fact, if you take the service and everything together, 40 to 45%, manufacturing dies, they will die. So given this scenario, what the government did is before COVID, they were trying to boost up the manufacturing, give large amount of tax relief. Interest rate was lowered so that let the people come and take money and produce, invest. Nothing happened. In an uncertain world, unfortunately so, investors were not eager, even if you give them interest-free loans, they were not eager to invest. Uncertainty is such a thing that people just don't venture into anything. Interest rate lower, some government ideas were those of us who want to buy, say, houses. That's a big investment. That's a big activity in the economy. If the construction activities go up, so many other sectors get a fillip: steel, aluminium, engineering goods, cement, you name it. But no, in an uncertain world, even at that time, people were not eager to invest in housing as well. So the construction activity also was slowing down. All over there was a problem, and COVID, as I said, added injury to insult, so to say. What the government did, one thing they realized is, if people don't have purchasing power, if they don't have money, then whatever the manufacturing was telling before COVID, that there is not enough buyer, that will go up in leaps and bounds. So even the necessary goods, that sector will say, we cannot have produced because there are no buyers. That's one thing. The other thing is people losing jobs. We have seen about migrant labor story all over the world, even those who are not migrants, who stayed back within their state. Same problem. You don't have jobs. And there was no certainty when the job will come back. So the initial story was very clear all over the world, and India is no exception. Give money straight away by transfer to these people. So let them spend. And if they spend, that will give a demand boost, and that will give some boost to the manufacturing activities, to start with the necessary goods, and then gradually, maybe the not so much necessary, but things like, say, mobile phones or other kinds of things, durable consumer goods, because they have also a huge market in rural areas nowadays, with fast-moving consumer goods, as we say. Overall, the demand boost. Unfortunately, India did not spend much on the real direct transfer. In some of the developed economies, they spend something like almost like 8 to 10% in this. India spent in direct transfer something like 1% of their GDP. Lot of criticism. India went for some other policies. I am not going to touch much on that. It's basically monetary policy and economic reform, a peculiar combination of policies, which other countries did not see, but we did. Too much emphasis on indirect ways, but direct transfer was minuscule, something like 1%. So suppose we increase it to 6%. My contention is that that's not going to be a very sustainable strategy. It's a very short term. Even in the short term, I would say there are ifs and buts. Think about this. Suppose you give 100 rupees to a person who has lost a daily worker, who has lost jobs. You give 100 rupees. Now that person will think, tomorrow there is no certainty that I will get back the job. Tomorrow also the same thing will happen. But the government is giving me 100 rupees now. They are not going to give this for indefinite period. Maybe 1 month, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, I will get some money in my bank account by direct transfer. How many people are getting it is a different question. But assuming that everybody gets that, should I hold this money as some kind of security for future, or shall I spend now? My point is, in a world of uncertainty, there is no guarantee that even if you transfer money, people will spend that money right away. They will try to hold on to it. The downside of this is, if you do not spend money on, say, nutritious food, if your protein intake goes down, you are vulnerable to COVID itself. So one side is economic activity, give income, boost demand. The other side is necessity. If people can't eat enough nutritious food, you cannot save them from being vulnerable to COVID. As we all know, if your protein intake goes down, your vulnerability goes up. So there is a whole nexus of this. Uncertain world, transfer is not a very long-term sustainable strategy. Along with that, another thing happened is the distribution of income was going against large number of poor or low-income families. We know the inequality has increased in India over last 10, 15 years. And what happened, if inequality increases, most of the rich who get more of this income do not spend, but they accumulate in terms of absolutely unproductive things. Gold, sending money abroad. So in this unequal distribution, if you push in more money in some form or other, that's not going to help the economy to boost up the demand. That might lead to more unproductive accumulation in the hands of someone. So given this scenario, what's the sustainable story which we can think of in a long run story? After all, we have to sustain something. In short run, in an uncertain world, all this one-time, two-time measures will just peter out. But this whole story of unemployment, uncertainty, people not spending, the demand problem coming in, and the whole manufacturing sector is down. And as I'm arguing, if the manufacturing sector is down, the service sector would be down because they depend largely on the manufacturing. My point is very clear in this. One thing is, if you want to sustain the economic activity, and if you want to sustain the employability of daily workers, who are the majority in India and mostly in the informal activities, and if that is connected to large extent to manufacturing activities and related service activities, you have to boost up the manufacturing, you have to boost up the service sector, and in an integrated way. How that can be done? That's the major issue. People have many types of things, many stories. But as you can understand, how long you can prop up small and medium industries, for example, who are the backbone for employment, how can you prop up that? Even suppose if you agree that I will give you something like 6 months wages, you pay the workers even if you do not need to produce. Indian government didn't do it, unfortunately. But this was done in European Union and United States, for example. They paid money to the medium and small industries to sustain the workers. In India, we did not take that step. On the other hand, we just tried to boost up the medium and small scale industry. In what way? We said, look, you go to the banks, you get loans. We have given enough money to the banks and they are supposed to reduce the interest rate, and we stand the guarantor. Indian government will stand guarantor if you take loans and expand your activity, begin your closed shops. We stand guarantor behind you. But think about this. You are a guarantor, no doubt. But who will come forward to take money? And this is a typical question of adverse selection which we have in economics. In all probability, some of these people who will come forward to take this are not really true investors. We know there are scenarios in India where there are people who take loans and simply vanish in the blue. Non-performing assets are going up in the banking sector, and the banks are simply wary of giving loans. And who will come forward when the government announces that I am your guarantor, interest rate is very low, come forward. In an uncertain world, many of the true investors will not be interested because I don't know if I take the money, I will be able to repay it. If the government stands guarantor, even then, what will happen? I cannot really start production and have a safe market in front of me because I don't know whether demand can be sustained. So some of these very fishy investors may come in, take the money. So there is a peculiar scenario of inertia. Banks were sitting with money, which the government gave them, Reserve Bank gave them huge amount of money. In fact, altogether, I calculated something like 17 lakh crores had gone to the banking sector directly or indirectly through the government and through the Reserve Bank of India in some form or other. The whole idea is just pushing this money into the economy in the form of loans. People did not take loans even when the COVID was not there. Investors did not take loans. Banks did not give loans because they were afraid that these were all fishy investors will take the money and run away. And then all the directors of banks will be, the vigilance will call and put them in jail. So there's this inertia. And if before COVID, this inertia was there, after COVID, this just simply increased by multiple times. So in this world of inertia, one cannot think of a sustainable development in the long run through this method. So I have a very simple, not simple, but it's my idea because I am thinking it for some time now. So it appears to me simple, but maybe a little complicated. In terms of its successful implementation, always a problem. Because of, as you know, in India, what the problems are. Because there is this rent seekers all around. 100 rupees you put in somewhere, there are people who are trying to grab this, which they do not deserve. So implementation has a lot of problems. But let me just put this in long run, along with the short run boosting measures. In an uncertain world, I am not certain that this can be sustained in the long run. What can be done? One thing is clearly there's a big role of the government. And there are two sustainable issues come. One is that they have to invest, apart from whatever boosting transfer they are giving, they have to invest in infrastructure. You know, infrastructure doesn't produce output right away, but it produces income. It generates employment. It boosts up the private sector. 1 rupee invested by the public investment can generate more than 1 rupee in private investment sooner or later. So the government has to come. But what is the constraint on the part of government? The constraint is really the fiscal constraint. In India, we go by what is called FRBM Act. The government has some kind of a restriction that you cannot borrow more than, say, something like 3.5% of the total GDP of the economy. Who puts this limit? This limit is put just because India, whatever we claim to be India is the future in 21st century, we know that if we try to borrow too much, the world credit rating agencies will downgrade us from A+ to C. And we are simply dead. Because if the credit rating agencies downgrade us, all this foreign investment which is coming will stop. So where is the limit? If we start borrowing too much, these credit rating agencies, through their typical theories which they have, I don't have time to go through this, that why the credit rating agencies are so blindly following some theories which may be completely out of place now. I call it out of place because at this moment, if you try to think that this fiscal constraint, that I cannot spend more than 3.5% deficit, I cannot go beyond that, you are simply locking yourself in a dead well, a blind spot. You must increase it if needed to 6 to 7% of GDP. Because you have to spend money in transfer, maybe more. A 1 month, 2 month sustainable transfer is not enough. You may have to do it for 8 months. In various ways, the transfer has to go to the poor and the medium and small industries to sustain people. If you do that, you need money. On the other hand, for long-term sustainability, create infrastructure, power, roads, social infrastructure, public health has come up so much in recent days. Invest in the public infrastructure, in public health, in all other sectors, land improvement, port, whatever. Employ people there, generate income. Now the government, as I said, is constrained, and that's not a problem for European Union, UK or USA. No credit rating agencies are, breathing on their shoulders that if you spend 6% of GDP, I'm going to downgrade you. They have the fiscal space. India doesn't. We are a developing country. We are under the constant watch of either these credit rating agencies or IMF, World Bank. We cannot do much. That really puts us in some kind of a spot. So the other way we can do it is to involve the private sector, the PPP mode, public-private partnership. Remember, 80% of our income is now goes to the private sector. So if the private sector says, I don't have a responsibility of ownership in infrastructure spending, why should citizens of India tolerate this? Private sector getting 80% of total GDP, and if they say, I don't have a responsibility in this hour to share a burden of infrastructure, that's not an acceptable proposition. So PPP, either the government does it by simply coercing the private sector, telling them clearly, if you do it, fine, or else we are going to have some kind of non-cooperation in future with you, all business. They listen to this kind of words. Or go for the foreign investment. Foreign investors, as we know, dream $5 trillion economy in 5 years. then in order to successfully carry out this dream, you need foreign investment, because our savings rate is so low, 30% of our GDP is savings. Where from the other money will come? It will come from the foreign investors. But the paradox is, the more you reduce your interest rate, the more attractiveness of foreign investors are going down. They invest in India because the return is higher. If the return gets lower, they will simply be not that interested. So there is a problem in the investment sector, but that's one way out. Clearly, long-term sustainability from short to medium to long, that's one way out, no other way. The second way, and that's the last way, and I will stop there, is the self-sustainability of the sector in manufacturing, which generates employment and is the backbone of the manufacturing now. That is the small and medium industries. Remember, one reform I supported very much. The definition of small and medium industries, which was simply 10 crores of rupees, has been increased to 200 crores. And that's a big opportunity. Why? Because nowadays, the small and medium sector is linked to the large industries through what is called the supply chain, the global value chain. So you are producing an Apple computer or a Hyundai motor car, but all the parts and components are strewn all over the world. And they are produced by the small and medium industries. And what happened? China controls almost like 23-24% of all this value chain, either through parts component production or assembly. Now, after the COVID, there is a clear sign on part of the large multinational companies in Europe, UK, USA, Australia, and Japan, and Korea. Move out of China. They have a monopoly power. If there's something happens there, the whole world suffers. Supply chain gets broken. Supply has a problem. So just make it more diversified, the supply base. Number of companies are doing this right now. India had a golden opportunity that would have given a sustainable path for our medium and small industries who employ a lot of our unskilled labor as well. That would boost our construction sector because people get money and spend for houses and other things. And construction activities in general will also go up. Overall, there is a boost in manufacturing, employment, and services related to manufacturing. That requires a concerted effort of Government of India, not only for Atmanirbhar, but how to locate this medium and small industries to the value chain. Unfortunately, India has talked a lot, has not acted that much, because that requires less bureaucracy, more active government intervention, more active Chamber of Commerce intervention in abroad and here. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Latest story goes that if there is 100 activities which were shifted from China, 85 to 90 has gone to Vietnam, to Laos, to Cambodia, to Thailand, to Malaysia. Maybe 5 or 10 have come to India. So we are a clear loser in this also. But that's a way out. That's the future, where we can have a sustainable medium and small industry. And the overall sustainable growth can show some light in this dark age and some certainty to this large, unorganized, informal workers who are suffering these days. Thank you very much.
Sir, should I start a question with a question? Just want to ask a few things, one or two things. IMF has said that India's GDP growth rate is going down to 1.2 something, right? So do you predict any revival under this, with this prediction, and how important or how correct would be IMF, this kind of organization's prediction under this situation, this pandemic situation? I mean, are they like we find who making mistakes every day and then again correcting the mistake? So is IMF, when it is predicting that India will have only 1.23, I think I saw, growth rate, is it dependable? Can we really depend on it, or can we be very depressed that IMF is giving us this kind of ranking? Just as you said, that credit rating will fall if we do something different. How important are these organizations under these conditions of pandemic?
Let me tell you one thing very clearly. I don't really, in any webinar, I don't get into this future predictions. See, what's the problem of this? In case of a 1929 depression, you know that you are putting in money. That's how it will be distributed. Money goes into the economy. There are these channels, and there is predictability. In this case, you have the added dimension of an unpredictable pandemic. Who knows that whether the vaccine will be there? Who knows whether there will be a second surge? So IMF, 3 months from now, will revise its estimate depending on what COVID is doing. So all this prediction at this moment is very difficult thing. So even commenting on these predictions, I would say, is wasting of time. Rather, what I did, and in fact, that's what I think is more productive, is to see what's the real right path through which the economy should try to move, through which the government should try to steer the economy. That makes sense. Now, if steering that, we do not achieve a 2.5% growth, but we achieve a 1.2% growth, that's even acceptable. That at least you have taken the right sustainable path. And then, given this pandemic, you cannot be so sure. You can simply slip out of this path which you are traveling. I accept that. But all this predictability, it's something which I find is, all these models, simulation models, and which IMF and some other agencies are doing. I simply find it, spending time or running after El Dorado or something like that.
El Dorado.
I do not.
Yeah, that's what I think. And I'm sorry, I'm taking up all the time asking questions. But one question, I can't resist this, that we are trying to make a choice between safe living and safe future, right? So this choice, the healthcare sector might come out to be a very important sector, providing not only healthcare, but also providing living opportunities, earning opportunities. So how should I say, what is the future of private investors? Private investors coming into this healthcare sector, because return, I'm not really sure how much is a return from these sectors, how lucrative would that be for the private sectors?
Let me tell you one thing. One is that you can have a complete private sector activity in this health industry, I would say, and healthcare, if you like to call it. I would say it's tremendously profitable. Nobody knows what the profit is. If you look at the healthcare, which is, I would say, very loosely controlled by the government, they have very eclectic policies towards healthcare in private sector. Eclectic. If there is a pressure from the general public, you do something. If the pressure goes down, you do something else. But remember, private sector coming into the healthcare, this particular thing, the government investment in this sector has to go up tremendously too. I'm not against private sector coming in, because those who have money, wealthy, let them not take the other part of this which the common people use, who are not so wealthy. They have to depend on the public healthcare facilities. Let that facility improve its efficiency, become more amenable, is affordable. Let the government spend money on that, and let those who are wealthy, let them take more of this private sector. So what I'm saying, let these two sectors grow, no problem, and let the public sector facilities get a facelift, get more efficient. Let the government spend money after that. That solves the problem to a large extent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Shravani?
Yes, ma'am.
Or Shweta, who's taking up? You're taking up?
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to you, sir, for delivering such an informative and wonderful lecture. Now, there are also some questions in the chat box, but due to paucity of time, we have to select some of them. The first one comes from Shubhadeep De. And the question is, how rating agency differentiate rating program for developed and developing country? Is it be changed due to COVID-19? Sir.
I doubt whether it will change or not. How the rating agencies really rate the economies is something which is in a black box. Nobody knows very clearly how that is done. But there are some certain parameters which they go through, including ease of doing business, and then fiscal deficit, then growth rate. There are a number of parameters by which they go. But these are very mechanical parameters. Sometimes one has to go beyond these parameters, but unfortunately, if you go beyond these parameters and violate some of them, the credit rating agencies simply downgrade it. And so why they choose those criteria is the black box. I can't really comment on that.
The next one is from the same person. And the question is, sir, do you think behavioral economics is now like herd immunity for common public, which only happened due to COVID-19?
Herd immunity, I don't think has anything to do with behavioral nature. Herd immunity is something which I think the doctors can say much better because they know how the herd immunity grows. Behavior is something by which we mean that you avoid this contagion to spread. There are two different things. One is the herd immunity is your resistance which grow due to your genetic feature, due to environment in which you live. The other is just to avoid the contagion to spread more, social distancing or whatever. That's the behavior. The herd immunity, I don't think is too much depends on the behavior. That depends more on the medical activities or professional medical activities in the society.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I request Dr. Shweta Guho, Associate Professor, Department of Philosophy, to introduce our next speaker. And thank you, sir, once again for giving your time.
Thank you, Ajita. Thank you. If you want to stay with us, you are welcome. In any way, you can stay with us.
In the middle, so please forgive me if I vanish in the middle. But I thank you all for giving me a patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sravuni. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a great honor to have with us Dr. A.K. Sannal, Chairman, West Bengal Biodiversity Board and Director of Zoological Survey of India. He is a Fellow of Zoological Society, Kolkata, West Bengal, Academy of Science and Technology, Council Member and Biological Science Secretary of Asiatic Society, Kolkata. He had completed 2 prestigious courses on biodiversity and environmental impact assessment from the University of Bradford, UK and Singapore. A great taxonomist, Dr. Sannal, discovered over 130 new species of animal. His research specialization includes taxonomy, ecology, wildlife, and biodiversity. He has published several books and scientific papers in national and international journals. One of the most thrilling informations is Dr. Sannal has joined 19th Indian Scientific Expedition Team to Antarctica during 1999-2000 and discovered 6 new species. Now I would like to request Dr. Sannal to deliver his lecture on biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everybody. At the outset, I would like to express my, I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to the principal madam and the organizers of this webinar for collaborating with West Bengal Biodiversity Board in this very prestigious and the very important webinar at this moment at this moment in relation to the biodiversity conservation and human well-being. And I am also very happy and privileged to be honored for inviting me to deliver a talk on the subject. And yesterday, I also attended the whole program, and I have listened to the lectures delivered by the eminent speakers. Actually, really, I was very glad to hear those lectures, and which are very much pertinent to this present time, and also very much helpful and informative to the students who are attending this webinar. And I also express my sincere thanks to the students, particularly the student participants who are attending this webinar for their interest in this subject. As I have just mentioned this one, as because we are always speaking about the apathy to the nature by the present students, present generation, young generation, but in most of the cases it is not the fact. My experience speaks that it is we the people are really responsible, and we have to take the responsibility to make them aware, to make them get interested in this subject towards the conservation of the nature, as because we live in the nature and we get everything from the nature, and so that we have to have conserve the nature for our own welfare. Okay, my today's topic is biodiversity conservation and sustainable development, which is the basic theme of this webinar. It is okay. It is visible.
Yeah,
Slide.
no, sir. No, sir. Slide is not visible. Please share the screen, sir.
Share the screen. I'm not getting that option. Share the screen here.
Yeah, share screen, and if you get the screen, স্যার আপনি যে ছবিটা দেখছেন না, শেয়ার স্ক্রিন করলে আমাদের ছবিটা দেখছেন, ওইটার উপর আগে ক্লিক করুন, ওইটার উপর ক্লিক করুন, করলে নিচে শেয়ারটা অ্যাক্টিভেট হবে স্যার।
ইয়েস,
শেয়ারে এবারে শেয়ারে ক্লিক করুন, আগে ছবিটার উপর করে তারপর শেয়ারে করুন।
আচ্ছা,
প্রথমে শেয়ার স্ক্রিন করলে আমাদের এই ছবি, আপনার ছবিটা আসবে, আপনার বা আমাদের কারো ছবি আসছে, সেইটার উপর ক্লিক করুন।
হ্যাঁ, এলো
নিচে শেয়ার স্ক্রিন সবুজ রঙের আছে তো?
হ্যাঁ, শেয়ার করলাম, ওটা ক্লিক করলাম। হ্যাঁ, তারপরে আমার স্ক্রিন, আমার স্লাইডটা এলো।
ছবিটা আসলে ছবিটার উপর ক্লিক করুন।
ছবিটার উপর ক্লিক করে,
হ্যাঁ আসছে স্যার। হ্যাঁ, এবারে শেয়ার করুন, শেয়ার লিখুন, শেয়ারটাকে ক্লিক করুন। হ্যাঁ, এসেছে স্যার, এসে গেছে স্যার, এসে গেছে। হ্যাঁ,
এসে গেছে।
হ্যাঁ, এসে গেছে স্যার।
Okay, thank you.
Sir, please go for the slideshow mode. Slideshow mode.
Slideshow mode.
অমিত, ছেড়ে দাও, এটা থাক না, কিছু অসুবিধা হবে না স্যার। এটা
আপনি নিচের দিকে দেখুন, যেখানে 70% লেখা আছে তার বাঁদিকে বাটনটা ক্লিক করলেই হবে।
আমার নিচে দিকে কিছু দেখা যাচ্ছে না।
আচ্ছা,
ছেড়ে দাও।
আমার মনে হয় হ্যাঁ,
ঠিক আছে
স্যার। স্যার F5 টা বাটনটা টিপবেন, আপনার F5।
আচ্ছা, F5 টিপলাম।
না, স্যার আপনি যেরকম বলছেন এটাতেই বলুন, আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি পরিষ্কার।
Okay, if it is visible, no problem. Okay. My topic that I have already mentioned, that biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. I would like to start with the history of fall of ancient civilization. First, the Tigris-Euphrates civilization. It was extended from 5000 BC to 6th century BC, And we have read in our school history books about the Mesopotamia, the most important state in the central the Western Asia, and geographically located between Tigris and Euphrates Valley, two rivers. And the Mesopotamia in Greek, it is meant that between the two rivers. And this Mesopotamia was for about 4,000 years. 4,000 years, this civilization was extended, and it was very developed due to this presence of the valley, and this valley developed the land through the seed deposition, and land became very fertile, and 90% people they were the farmer, depend on agriculture, and a great development of the trade, particularly of different metals and foodstuffs were there in this progressive British civilization. But unfortunately, due to overpopulation of the environmental degradation, the prolonged drought appeared in this area. And due to this, for 200 years it was continued. And due to this prolonged drought, this civilization was ultimately collapsed. So that we can say this is only due to environmental degradation. And there's another civilization, Khmer Empire of ancient Cambodia. This is in the Southeast Asia, 7th century. It was flourished, and more than 600 years now. This empire after collapse, now the area has been developed as the different states, countries, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. And here also, the main resource was the agriculture due to the fertile land all over the country at the time. But unfortunately, again here, due to overpopulation, the prolonged drought, this empire, Khmer Empire, was collapsed. And again, this environmental degradation and environmental problem. And the Maya civilization of Central America, this is a very famous civilization from 1800 BC to 250 AD. And it was in the modern day Guatemala area. And in the art, architecture, business, mathematics, astrology, astronomy, and in all these fields, this Mayan civilization was very developed, enriched. And another natural resource which was there, the rich tropical rainforest. This rich tropical rainforest with having very rich biodiversity. But unfortunately, this Mayan civilization ultimately collapsed in 250 AD. And again, this overpopulation, environmental degradation, and resulting prolonged drought. Then next, I will come to the Roman civilization. This is also very known to us, this Roman civilization and its collapse. A post-Republican period of ancient Rome, particularly the Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia. In 18th century BC to 5th century BC, it was extended and developed mainly in engineering. Engineering part of this Roman civilization is very famous, well developed. And due to this development in engineering, the cities were very much developed. The outstanding buildings, roads, water systems, everything was very excellent. But this excellent civilization, very developed, rich civilization, ultimately collapsed due to environmental degradation and other factors, invasion of the enemies, etc., etc. But the main problem was the environmental degradation. And now I'm coming to Indus Valley civilization. It is very famous and very much known to us. It is also known as the Harappan civilization, 3300 BC to 1300 BC. In the Indus River Valley, it was situated, and the two cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro cities, were there. What happened? Bronze Age of South Asia, and ultimately collapsed changing river patterns. I am audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And then the only conclusion I can make that all these ancient civilizations, not according to me, the great British historian and the philosopher, great philosopher, published 12 volumes of books, 12 volumes of books, and for the period of 1934 to 61, a study of history, development, and decline of 19 civilization of the world, and that by Professor Arnold Toynbee, Joseph Toynbee. And he made a comment that great civilizations are not murdered. Instead, they take their own lives. They take their own lives. And how they took their lives? Due to overpopulation, due to unsustainable growth of population, unsustainable development of their in the agricultural sector, unsustainable development in engineering, in many other fields. And the result was the fall of the civilization. So that one question he raised, are we on the road of civilization collapse? But I think, and during this present scenario, the COVID scenario, all this question is coming up as because this Roman civilization, this Mayan civilization, Maya civilization, all were affected by pandemics, by virus attacks, and the catastrophic and natural catastrophes. And this natural catastrophic is also causing this pandemic at this present time. So that we should be very cautious. And these are the very ancient, the cases of in the ancient civilization. And just 100 years before, in 1924, Tagore and Gandhiji, they told that the Western development model of industrialization will cause disaster. That time, 100 years before, they thought in respect of the newly independent countries, they used to follow the paradigm of the Western culture, Western development pattern. And that time, they remarked that it will cause a great disaster. And in 1924, Tagore, in a lecture in China, he told that we have forever, essentially been dragged by the prosperous West behind its chariot. This chariot is the symbol of the progress, choked by the dust, deafened by the noise, humbled by our own helplessness. And this chariot drive was progress, and the progress is civilization. And the progress is civilization according to the Tagore. And if we ever venture to ask progress for what and progress for whom, it was considered to be peculiarly and ridiculously oriental to entrench such doubts about the absoluteness of progress. Of late, a voice has come. And this fast-moving Western chariot that Tagore refers to is the technology, and the ditches are the social and environmental degradation. Actually, due to this, the progress of the chariot, ditches are formed. Ditches are formed, and still it is. We find after through this developmental processes in the present time, and this chariot is the this is the effect of this progress. So that even 100 years before, this thought came in mind. And then the question comes, then what is the development? What is the development? If we don't go for the Western pattern of development, industrialization, then how the economic development will come? Because the improvement of the quality of human life is the real aim of all development. And this development process is always considered in terms of economic growth. as an important component of the development. And the development is the issue which is a growing phenomenon among the people. Everybody wants development. Every nation wants development. And because people always need change in terms of development and growth. But until 1980s, and this until 1980s, this development was always thought in terms of the economic development, and that development was at the cost of the nature, without considering the consequences of harming the nature, affecting the environment. But from 1980s onwards, this idea was changed a bit. And we know that the earth has why this economic development is to be considered, is to be thought in terms of the conservation of the environment, in terms of the nature. The earth has its limit with the best technology imaginable. They are not infinitely expendable. It is not irreplaceable. It is a fact. So that we have to have made our development within the ambit of the nature which we have got from the mother earth. So that living sustainably must be a guiding principle for all the world's people. And this living sustainably with whom? Living sustainably for whom? Who will live sustainably? And that's why a new kind of development that rapidly improves the quality of life for the disadvantage. Why disadvantage? As because if we think in our country's condition, 70% people that live in rural India, and there are 820 million people. They are chronic sufferer of diseases, and there are other facts and data are there. In this condition, if those people, 70% people, their life conditions are not developed, livelihood is not developed, then this development in true sense will not be achieved. And then that new form of development, and that is this sustainable, we call it the sustainable development. And this term sustainable development was first used in 1980 by the World Conservation Strategy presented by the IUCN. And the term became popular after 1987 report entitled Our Common Future, furnished by the World Commission on Environment and Development by the United Nations. And before this, I would like to mention two conferences, the United Nations conference, which will give the idea why this idea of sustainable development was originated. First, we go to United Nations conference on the human environment which was held in Stockholm in 1972. And this is the first, practically this is the first conference, United Nations International Conference, which thought about the environment, which thought about the human well-being, which thought about the conservation of nature, conservation of environment. And at this Stockholm conference, 26 principles and 109 recommendations are made. Mainly, the importance of giving to the human rights. Human rights must be asserted. That I have told that 70% of people, their rights should be ensured. And natural resources must be safeguarded. Earth's capacity to produce renewable resources must be maintained. There are other principles which were made during that conference. And after 20 years of the Stockholm conference, during these 20 years, several other meetings, conferences were held in different parts of the world. And ultimately, it was decided to hold a United Nations conference in 1988. This idea was originated to hold a conference, United Nations conference on environment and development, UNCED, environment and development, which was held in 1992 in June 3rd to 14th in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This is we commonly called as the Art Summit or Rio Summit. This Art Summit is not the conference for the agreement, legally binding agreement on Convention on Biological Diversity. It was mainly this conference was to adapt the draft of the Convention on Biological Diversity. But besides this, three other agreement documents were accepted in that summit. And first on the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, everything, all the thing is related to environment. Rio Declaration on Environment and Development related to the future guidelines in sustainable development. The first document on sustainable development. And another, we know it very much, very familiar to us, the Agenda 21. This Agenda 21, it is also non-binding action plan of the United Nations with regard to sustainable development. These two sustainable development documents. And third one is the forest principles. And these forest principles are also very much related to the sustainable development. Without conservation of the forest, a healthy forest in a nation, the sustainable development cannot be achieved. And besides these three documents, there are three important legally binding agreements were taken up in that conference. First one is the very famous and very much concerned with us, the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the third one is United Nations Conservation Convention to Combat Desertification. In this conference, it was decided that a commission should be formed, Commission on Environment and Development, which will go in details the modalities of the sustainable development in the world. And then the Prime Minister of Norway, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, was the chairman of that commission. And in 1984, they started to prepare this document. And ultimately, in 1987, it was published as entitled Our Common Future. And practically, as I have already mentioned, in 1980, the sustainable development, this term was developed. But ultimately, after the 1997, after publication of the Our Common Future, this sustainable development and this term was practically it got the importance and popular. And the most important part of this Our Common Future was a definition of the sustainable development, which said sustainable development is development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that in Bengali, we know that there is a story that we always tell, that one goddess told lady, what you want from me? She told that, Amar Shantan jano thake dudhe bhate. Our children, my children, that means in happiness, in well-being condition. This is the sustainable development. So that we should not think only about our present generation. We should have to think for our future generations, particularly in respect of the development. That is the sustainable development. So that and this one quote I would like to mention here by M.K. Gandhi. I don't want to protect the environment. I don't want to protect the environment. I want to create a world where the environment does not need protection. Where environment does not need protection. Environment itself, the humankind, the humankind who are enjoying the environment, they should automatically protect the environment. Then the nature will be saved. And then the sustainable development, there are three objectives: economic development, social equity, and environmental conservation. That earlier, before 80s and before that, the development was considered, measured in terms of economic development only. That repeatedly I have told everybody, told that. But social equity is to be considered. Access to basic needs such as health, education, human security, rights, gender equity, and distribution of benefits and access to resources across the society. That social is formed of humankind, that humankind should not be deprived from any benefits which would be generated from the economic development, And further, for the economic development, environmental conservation is to be considered. The environment is not to be sacrificed for this economic development. Concerns itself with conservation of natural resources and minimizing impacts on physical and biological resources. So that this is ultimately the most important features on which the sustainable development depends. And we have to always consider the sustainable development in terms of social equity as well as the environmental conservation. And then in 2002 in Johannesburg, the Sustainable World Summit on Sustainable Development, and after that in 2011, another summit on sustainable development was held, and almost every day in other parts of the world, this summit or conference on sustainable development is going on. And we know about the millennium goal of development, sustainable development, but unfortunately due to failure of this goal, this 8 millennium development goals are there, and covering all these three aspects: economic development, social equity, and environmental conservation. All are there, but due to some other reasons, it was not fulfilled. Then in 2015, in 25th September, in the United Nations General Assembly, it was another next part, next to 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, what we called Sustainable Development Goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and 169 targets were declared in 2015. And this, it is known as the transforming our world. And the motto of this 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was that nobody should be kept behind. Everybody should come forward. And that is the motto of this 2030 Agenda. I do not know what will happen ultimately. And these 17 development goals already yesterday everybody and discussed these 17 sustainable development goals today also. And the first one, the madam today in the morning, he mentioned very clearly about this SDG, end poverty, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. We're very unfortunate that we're in such a position in the world that we're very developed country where our people are going to moon. We're doing so many things which the whole world is respecting in our country. uh, in almost all the sectors, but unfortunately still 800 to 900 million people are, that I have already mentioned, suffering with chronic diseases, and about 1.5 million children, they can't see the age of 5 years, and 1.7 million children, they are leaving schools due to malnutrition, and there are many informations there. But this is really a tragic part for us, and that's why this end poverty, this goal is the number one. Goal is the number one. And the second one is the end hunger. End hunger. And this hunger-related diseases is very common. And there is no need to mention the what the millions of people are in hunger. It is a fact that people are suffering from hunger in our country and all over the world, all over the world. And that's why this is the second target, and achieve food security. We know that the biodiversity, the plants, animals, and microbes, this biodiversity ensures the food security, ensures the food security. There are about 8,000 edible plants, edible plants. Of this, 200 plants are cultivated, and of these 200 cultivated plants, 20 plant species, and of the animals, 14 animal species are providing the human being about 80% of the calories, 80% of the energy, food energy. And that's why we can imagine how valuable this biodiversity is for ensuring the scarcity of food, food security. But still we are lagging behind. In this context, I would like to mention that this 200 plant species are being cultivated, but there are many plant species which have great potential to be used as a good source of food, good source of food. But unfortunately, I'm confident to say that unfortunately the scientists are not working out the value, food value, and their use for the people. And we know that this 470 or 76 million indigenous people in our country and the tribal people, they mostly depend on the for their food on the biodiversity. They are indigenous and local biodiversity. But why not all these biological resources, the biodiversity, are not to be tapped for getting a valuable food for the humankind? One example I can give: the fungi. Fungi. The fungi is a very, very rich in protein, very, very rich in protein. And people eat this, use this fungi, but very rare. In our society, very few people occasionally they use this fungi. But there are a very good number, hundreds of fungi which are edible, And I always advocate, and I have requested many fungi specialist experts and to requested them to prepare the nuggets of made of fungus as the soybean. The soybean nuggets are sold in the market at 10 rupees, 15 rupees, 20 rupees. The village people, the poor people, they are purchasing, making soup, the curry, and they are getting the protein. So why not with the fungi? So that there are other plant and animal species which are to be used to end this hunger, to ensure this food security, which biodiversity can only do. Attain a healthy life, health, that Madam also mentioned in the morning. In the health sector, the biodiversity has a great role. Biodiversity has a great role as because there are about 7,500 plant species which are of medically important, and in China, more plant species are used. Nearly 1,500 species are used for preparation of medicine. In our country, nearly 800 species are used. 800 species are used for preparation of medicines. And in USA, 70% of the prescription medicines are either prepared from animal or plant species, which are prescription medicines, and very and earning millions of US dollars from those medicines. And I'm not going into details. There are so many facts about this biodiversity and the medicine. And then quality education. Actually, the 17 goals. Yesterday, that Madam Chatterjee mentioned, that a few goals that are related to this biodiversity. But I think all these 17 goals are very much related to the biodiversity. This health, and then quality education. If the hunger is there, if the malnutrition is there for lack of food, then how this quality education will come? The learning process will be developed. So that biodiversity is the first. Food is needed. Then gender equality. Gender equality is very important. Gender equality and gender equity. Gender equality, that means the equal preference, equal importance, men, women, and gender, different types of different genders. But equity is that women and other genders are always deprived historically or socially or otherwise. So that this equity is to be ensured for the development. I'm sure, and you may also be sure, that without the empowerment of women and girls everywhere, the environment cannot be conserved. It is a fact that women knows better about the environment than the men. In your garden, in the villages, I have my experience is that in villages, the women are very much knowledgeable about the medicinal plants, about the nurturing of the garden, about the environmental problems, about the conservation of the environment. We know that the TIPCO movement and there are other movements are also there, so that the women are to be empowered. And second thing, we know that we have said, everybody, you people have said that women are in the dusk, in the afternoon, the women are coming out of the forest with a bundle of wood on the headload wood, and they are selling that one and purchasing the rice, atta and other things, and they are sustaining with that one. And the second thing, the women are going to collect water, to fetch water 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers away from their home, and coming and going, the exertion and the food they are taking, if you consider, ultimately they will get suffered, and that will hamper the development of the environment, protection of the nature. So in different ways, this woman is to be empowered for development of the environment and for reaching the developmental goals. Water and sanitation. Water, very recently, the Niti Aayog, government of India, has told that by 2020, 21 cities in our country will get suffered out of water crisis. And in world, all of you know that water is a great crisis now. Water is a great crisis now. And this groundwater depletion. Groundwater depletion is caused due to degradation of environment, felling of trees, felling of trees. This is most important. And so that this environment is to be saved. Environment is to be saved only through the conservation of the floral resources and conservation of the faunal resources, and for water sustainable to make the sustainable world, water conservation through conservation of the biodiversity. And then this 30% of the people are in alarming state due to this this non-pure water. We can't supply the clean water to the 40% of these people, and they are suffering from water scarcity. And more and more countries are experiencing water shortage. By 2050, at least 1 in 4 people will suffer recurring water shortage. And the mountain region will provide 60 to 80% of the Earth's fresh water. And this ecosystem, mountain ecosystem, the forest ecosystem are to be conserved. Then this modern energy that biofuel, and yesterday Professor Padhi discussed in details about the energy source from the biodiversity. I'm not going into details. The sustainable economic growth. There is no need to explain this. This sustainable economic growth would not be possible without the development of the sustainable growth of the biodiversity. Promote sustainable utilization, industrialization, and at least 30% of the industry are depend on the biodiversity, biological resources, at least, so that this industry, for survival of this industries, biodiversity is to be maintained sustainably. Reduce inequality within and among countries. That is also important. Build inclusive, safe and sustainable cities and the human settlements. And the sustainable cities also depend on the sustainability of the livelihood of the humankind. That also depends on the biodiversity. Sustainable consumption. Overconsumption is one of the cause. Overconsumption due to overpopulation and overconsumption is one of the important cause of this failure. Failure of the civilization, failure in failure of the other sectors. And that I'm giving an example. In USA, one man consume 150, at least 150 kg of meat per month. And in that case, in India, about 15 to 20 kg, 15 to maximum 15 to 20 kg. In China, it is about 40 kg. And for supplying, for getting this 150 kg of meat for each person, you can imagine how much meat is required. And where from they are getting? USA getting. They're getting meat from the South Asian countries, underdeveloped countries. They are felling their tropical forest. They are felling their tropical forest to convert the forest for the grazing land, as the grazing land, and they are supplying the meat. And you can imagine the ultimate result, the loss of tropical forest, which is the life system of the humankind. And then promote actions at all levels to advance climate change. Climate change is very much related to the biodiversity existence and a healthy state of biodiversity. This climate change and attain conservation and sustainable use of marine resources. The marine resources are most valuable, and the economy of the nation very much dependent on the marine biological resources. Marine fishery is one sector in which the millions of people are connected, and their livelihood is dependent. So that this marine resources, the bioresources, are very, very important. Protect and restore terrestrial ecosystem and halt all biodiversity loss. Terrestrial ecosystem. If we start from the soil is formed with the active participation of the soil fauna and soil flora. And if this flora and fauna and the microbes present in the soil are not there, the soil will be turned into a wasteland. And this wasteland is without any fertility, lost its fertility. There will be no crop, and ultimately it will be lost. And that was happened in most of the ancient civilizations. The excessive overutilization use of the agricultural land, this terrestrial ecosystem was lost, and the land was unfertile, turned into unfertile, and to halt all biodiversity loss. All biodiversities are to be saved for safety of the humanity. Achieve peaceful and inclusive societies, rule of law, so that conservation of the biodiversity, and what about the Biodiversity Act has been enacted in our country, in other countries also all over the world. That is also a law. Without law, and this, in India, there are many hundreds of litigations are going on. Even in West Bengal also, we are very much connected with this. And this is related to law. This is for saving the biodiversity, for conservation of biodiversity, for sustainable utilization of biodiversity. Definitely law is needed, and strengthen and enhance the means of implementation of global partnership for sustainable development. Global partnership. Without the global partnership, global association, global assistance, no nation can manage their biodiversity, because the biodiversity is interrelated. It does not depend on any nation, depend on any country. It is the global natural resource, global resource. Though through the law, these resources have been divided country-wise, but it's a global resource. So that all these 17 sustainable goals for sustainable development, and this sustainable development for what? Towards the human welfare. Biodiversity is very much needed. And then comes this 2030 agenda and its 17 sustainable development goals, built on the Millennium Development Goals, but are much broader in scope and ambition. And this that I have already mentioned, that all these goals. And if we see the Social Progress Index, and towards this goal, fulfilling these goals, basic human needs. What are the basic human needs? Nutrition and basic medical care, water and sanitation, shelter, and personal safety. These are the basic needs. And for that, foundations of the well-being, access to basic knowledge, access to information and communications, health and wellness, ecosystem sustainability. Because this ecosystem, this ecological system, ecosystem services, and ecosystem functions are very much dependent on the biodiversity. And biodiversity is always dependent, vice versa, dependent on the ecosystem function and services. And from this basic needs, the foundation of well-being, opportunity, personal rights, personal freedom and choice, tolerance and inclusion, access to advanced education. This we should have to provide through these development sustainable goals. And then this most unique feature of Earth is the existence of life, the biological diversity, the life forms, and then This biodiversity in broad sense is the variety of life that I've already mentioned, and other speakers already mentioned about the biodiversity. And this is the ecosystem services, and there are 4 main services and the 22 functions, minimum 22 functions are there. All these 22 functions are being executed, functioned by the active involvement, active participation, directly or indirectly, by the biodiversity. And without these ecosystem services and ecosystem functions, this living system with the human being, our well-being, our welfare, our livelihood, development, everything depends on the ecosystem functioning and services, and which is again dependent on the biodiversity. And this human well-being is a human experience that includes the basic materials for a good life, freedom of choice and action, health, good social relationships. This is the requirement for the well-being, and everything is we are getting from this biodiversity. This well-being of man is based more or less directly on the sustained delivery of the fundamental ecosystem services that I have mentioned, and if this ecosystem services and functions are in properly formed, and with the humankind enjoy these functions and services in true sense, then we will be happy, and that happiness we call it the bio-happiness. And bio-happiness is the sustainable and equitable use of biodiversity, leading to the creation of more jobs and income. This is the bio-happiness. We are after the bio-happiness. Actually, we are after the bio-happiness, and this bio-happiness completely depends on the sustainable development. If the development is sustainable, then automatically the bio-happiness will generate. We can enjoy, and this sustainable development, in otherwise, it depends on ethics, bioethics, and environmental ethics, and these ethics are to be followed religiously. The economics, the depreciation of natural assets is not permitted to ecological economics. That economics is to be considered this natural ecological economics. Then equity, that I've already mentioned about the equity, gender equity, and equity in other fields also. The energy is the key factor in terms of both economic development and climate change. Economic energy, the employment for biohappiness through sustainable development, the employment is to be generated, and the education. Ultimately, without the education, environmental education, and education in general, basic education, learning process, without this sustainable development cannot be achieved. And then this
Please, next speaker, wait.
Yeah. And then this we can now conclude. I will say that without the biodiversity, this human welfare, human well-being cannot be achieved. But unfortunately, this biodiversity is in great threats, and the threats all of you know already discussed. This there are many threats, and of this most important one is the land degradation, change of land utilization, and fragmentation of land, habitat fragmentation. Habitat is getting lost due to developmental processes, and the invasive alien species, introduction of foreign species, exotic species, climate change, over-exploitation, over-consumption. That is another most important one. And we have already, this Earth has already experienced 5 episodes of extinction, and we are already facing the 6th episode of extinction. And scientists are of opinion that the 6th extinction will be caused due to the loss of the biodiversity. Due to loss of biodiversity, the 6th in other 5 extinctions were not related to the biodiversity extinction, biodiversity loss, but the 6th one would be very much related to the loss of the biodiversity. So that we have to think about the loss of biodiversity and these conservation methods. Already we know the whole world is thinking about the conservation, and Government of India has enacted the Biodiversity Act, after the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, and there are three main objectives of the Biodiversity Act, which were enacted in 2002 in our country. The first one is the conservation of biodiversity, and second one is the sustainable utilization of the biological resources, genetic resources, sustainable utilization, and third one, the most unique part of this act is the equitable sharing of benefits. Equitable sharing of benefits. That is the most important part in the sense that the community who are conserving the biodiversity throughout the generations, those communities are to be rewarded, in which means to be rewarded through development of their livelihood, and in that sense, there are different measures have been taken up so that these people, the community people, are getting benefited. And there are many examples in our country where the community participation and the loss of biodiversity, loss of forest has been protected, conserved through community participation, and the poachers, the poaching of the birds in different natural ecosystems, and that has been checked through the community participation, through active participation, initiation of the government and forest department, and through initiation of the ecotourism, and that the local people are getting benefited, and they are getting interested for the conservation of biodiversity and the benefiting of the humankind and mother nature, and the people in different parts of the country. They are on their own. They have realized through the participation of the different NGOs towards the protection of the environment, and their active participation through particularly through community participation, the environment is getting saved and conserved. Biodiversity is getting conserved. And lastly, we can conclude that there is a need to alter our epistemological understanding of the meaning of the development. That means the only economic development without considering the nature, without considering the environment. Development does not mean only economic development that satisfies only our consumer's lifestyle. We have to think the development, we have to think the development of the lifestyle, livelihood of the humankind through conservation of biodiversity. Then only can these 17 sustainable development goals can be achieved in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening speech. Due to time constraint, yes, we have taken one question. A student from Surendranath College, Somdev, Department of Zoology, 4th semester. He has a question: how can we overcome the biodiversity threats such as climate change, regime shift in pre-predation interaction for sustainable development?
Actually, the climate change is one of the threat for loss of the biodiversity. It is a fact. And this climate, what happens if the only climate change happens, the loss of biodiversity would not be much, as because to avoid this climate change, the plant, particularly the animals can shift their habitat, But the problem is this: where they should go, as because the habitats are also already lost, habitats are already fragmented, lost, so that due to scarcity of suitable habitat, these animals, mostly the animals, cannot change their present habitat, and they are affected by the climate change. So that the only way to avoid this loss for the climate change is to reduce the problems, reduce the causes related to the climate change. Without that, the biodiversity cannot be saved.
Thank you, sir. Now I would request Dr. Devlina Kumar to continue the session. Over to you, Devlina.
Thank you, Shitadi. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We have reached to the final session of our two-day international webinar. In this session, we will have a panel discussion on sustainability and biodiversity in post-COVID period. To enrich us in this session, we have with us our first panelist, Dr. Monomita Nandi, who is a reader in accounting and finance at Brunel Business School, UK. She has completed her PhD from University of Calcutta, India, and University of Rome, Tor, Italy. She worked as visiting research fellow at Lally Business School, New York, and Radboud University, Holland. She is interested in interdisciplinary research and technological advancement in emerging issues in corporate finance and banking. Her research works are published in international peer-reviewed journals like IJFE, TIJA, etc. And she is involved in editorial and review activities of international journals. She is a co-chair of Southeast Group of British Accounting and Finance Association and act as an expert at PMI of the European Accounting Section. Our second panelist is Ms. Lee Roberts, research scholar and lecturer in accounting, Brunel University, London. Her area of research includes corporate social responsibility, director network, and other emerging topics in corporate finance and accounting. And our final panelist is Ms. Jaskaran Kaur, research scholar, Brunel University. Her area of research is extinction accounting and corporate biodiversity. Thank you very much, Dr. Monomita and her team. It's over to you, ma'am.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't know how lengthy the talk would be because of the time constraint, and I can understand there were lots of problems with the timing. And but I think when Devlina was introducing us, she did a little bit of mistake, and because no, it's okay. Because Lee's research area is more on extinction and on biodiversity issues, and Jaskaran is able to, she is working on directors network and other topic. But because of the time constraint, no, it's okay. Because of the time constraint, Jaskaran cannot continue with us. So I will quickly go through her slides, but because we are running too late and Lee needs to leave. So I would first introduce Lee Roberts, who is a research scholar at Brunel Business School. And we are working on extinction accounting and different biodiversity issues. So she will discuss briefly about her research interest and how these things are related to the sustainability and other issues. So I will start with Lee, and I will start sharing the screen for her. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
That's great. So our previous plan was to talk about CSR by Jaskaran, and then role of corporate in biodiversity and extinction by Lee, and then I will carry on with the sustainability in Indian business. But because of the time constraint, I'm not sure whether I can continue all the points, but I will try my level best. So I will skip Jaskaran's slide and I will go with Lee. So it's over to you, Lee, now.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Lee Roberts. I'm a doctoral researcher at Brunel University. So thank you to the organisers for inviting me to your event, and it's great to share some knowledge on this subject. So yeah, welcome to my presentation, where I will discuss the corporate role in biodiversity loss and the extension of this to the species extinction crisis. So I hope I don't repeat too much of what's already been presented, but we know that natural capital of biodiversity and ecosystems underpins all societal, economic and business existence. And environmental issues and global challenges have received a lot of attention, such as climate change, carbon accounting, pollution, greenhouse gases, etc. So all environmental issues are important and are interconnected, but academic literature has focused little on impact by organisations to biodiversity loss, and specifically the extension of this to species extinction crisis. So the planet has seen drastic decline in health over the last decades, and this is driven mainly from over-exploitation from humans. And business behaviour is also regarded to be a main driver to the planetary crisis. And this has really depleted the planet into crisis point. So the latest study, or the latest report from IPBES, states it has scientific evidence that the planet is in its most vulnerable state in human history, and transformational changes must be made. And it estimates that up to 1 million plant and animal species are facing extinction within decades. So likewise, the World Economic Forum has recognised and reported biodiversity loss to be one of the top 5 global risks, stating biodiversity loss has critical implications for humanity, from the collapse of food and health systems to the disruption of entire supply chains. So this amplifies the real problem that society faces, but business survival and viability indeed depends on nature. So it might sound extreme, but some experts believe that continued destruction means that human extinction is not unthinkable as well. So scientists do believe we've entered the 6th mass extinction event, and the world has survived mass extinction events before, but these have been through natural events such as volcanic eruptions and asteroids, but this time it's driven by humans. So companies engage in corporate social responsibility and environmental and social governance reporting to communicate to their stakeholders and shareholders through CSR and environmental reports on how they're addressing these issues. But now they must include on how they're protecting and restoring species habitats, biodiversities, and the impact they're actually having on ecosystems and how they're addressing the crisis. So biodiversity loss from a business perspective is indeed a business risk. So crucially, businesses must now realise its critical dependence on ecosystems and biodiversity, and with an inaction to protect and conserve, corporate sustainability faces material financial risk and indeed ongoing viability. So all businesses are affected. Organisations are beginning to realise their dependence on natural capital as it underpins all goods and services. For example, the pharmaceuticals industry, medicine and cancer drugs are derived from nature, pollination of food crops by insects and bees that are under threat from extinction are dependent on for natural pollination. If there's no natural pollination, it adversely affects the food industry. Cotton plants are also pollinated, which affects the clothing and retail industry. Depletion of sea corals, deforestation of land affects the tourism industry. So these are just some examples, but all industry sectors link back to and depend on nature, whether they're depleting directly or through their supply chains. So just a snapshot really of some recent contributions to literature. Some recent studies have investigated how corporates are disclosing on biodiversity and the species extinction. So what is noted is there is no uniformed or mandatory reporting format, only guidelines to follow, and it is voluntary. So the most widely adopted reporting format is through the Global Reporting Initiative, which is criticised in literature as being a sort of tick box exercise for companies to disclose information, and it is used as a tool to legitimise activities to stakeholders, gain societal acceptance and enhance the company reputation. Some researchers find that companies reporting through the GRI format find that disclosure on biodiversity does increase over years, but statements are found to be symbolic and general rather than providing comprehensive information on their actual impacts. But recognising the limitation of the GRI, some emerging scholars have extended the frameworks and tested disclosure on companies to examine if disclosure increases on biodiversity and extinction. So they do find that disclosure from companies globally increases over time, which is encouraging. However, overall disclosure is still low and much work is still needed to be done by companies to raise awareness and to increase accountability. So research concludes really that corporate reporting on biodiversity and species extinction is minimal, and companies display vague statements on the issues, and few companies seem to be sincerely addressing the crisis and providing any substantial reporting. However, there is some evidence that companies are starting to show more genuine concern for nature. A study in South Africa where integrated reporting is mandatory and is seen in literature as a futuristic method of reporting by embedding a value creation in a company, merging both financial and non-financial information, finds that companies are engaging in conservation efforts, and in this case, specifically for the rhinoceros in South Africa, which is threatened with extinction. So these companies recognise if this species were to go extinct, then their tourism would suffer, and therefore that motivates them to engage in protecting the species. Empirically, studies of global companies who engage with wildlife partners, so WWF and IUCN, tend to disclose more information than companies that do not. So companies that are forming partnerships are engaging in conservation efforts to protect and restore species, habitats and biodiversity. So this is encouraging as collaboration, shared knowledge and an interdisciplinary approach is required and recommended in literature. And to address these crises, key advisors and experts across professions, for example, scholars, scientists, ecologists, economists and accountants is needed. Empirical evidence also finds companies from high intensive industries such as metals, mining and energy disclose more than companies from low risk intensive industries. And this is expected as they impact the biodiversity and ecosystems more. Also, some positive relationships are found with companies who provide disclosure in biodiversity, and these companies are gaining awards and gaining assurance. So these studies just highlight that there's still much work to be done by corporate organisations to address the crises. Slide 2, please, Mono. So some international bodies to help address biodiversity and species extinction. So the HE announced the Decade in Biodiversity from 2011 to 2020 with the expectation that biodiversity loss would be addressed. However, it is thought that these have not really been successful as the planet is still currently in a state of emergency and there's still a clear disconnection between humans and nature. The Global Reporting Initiative, as I mentioned, these standards are the most commonly reported format that companies follow. So these are international standards, but this is voluntary and it is criticised in literature as being insufficient. International Conservation and Nature, the IUCN Red List, is the world's largest audit of species and provides the information on the state of extinction, with currently over 30,000 species threatened with extinction on the list. And the most recent and ambitious international strategy comes from the United Nations, which we've heard a lot about in these presentations. So specifically goal 14 and 15, life underwater and life on land. So these are to specifically target and minimise biodiversity loss and species extinction. So corporates must now align with these goals and embed them in their reporting format. And finally, integrated reporting. So the future of corporate reporting, as literature suggests, is an integrated reporting format, combining both financial and non-financial information with a focus on value creation and aligning with these United Nations goals and innovating change. Slide 3, please, Mono. So going forward, the future of business reporting post-COVID-19 and for indeed business and human survival, the issue is gaining momentum, especially with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, with some experts believing that the human infringement on nature, so the destruction of habitats, illegal wildlife trade and wet markets can lead to these zoonotic spillover of diseases and cause pandemics. Going forward, there is a need for a uniform, transparent, comparable and possibly regulated framework to address biodiversity and extinction loss impact from businesses. For change, corporate need to change values, their vision and their behaviours must change. They must select supply chains conscious of mitigating impact to biodiversity. A change from capital profit maximisation to a sustainable society for all. Change from anthropocentric human hierarchy to an ecocentric or ecological perspective to harmonise with nature, and create trust with stakeholders, and stakeholders must demand and put pressure on companies on how to and if they're addressing both the biodiversity and species extinction crisis. So questions to ask to determine if corporates are being responsible or not, and these are just a few points. So does the company have the expertise going forward? Are they collaborating with key advisors and experts? Does the company strategy or action plan aim towards biodiversity and species extinction and to address the issue? Does the company recognise the material financial risk of biodiversity loss? Is the company engaging with wildlife partnership organisations? Is there a clear alignment and strategy across the company throughout the employees, and do they raise awareness on the issues with their employees? Is there biodiversity assessments on the locations, the plants and the factories? And if so, why not? Do they transparently report? So are they disclosing issues that's maybe not good to read, but are they disclosing on fines, biodiversity or species loss due to their operations? But equally, this information is needed so they can learn how to move forward, learn from their mistakes. And do they adopt integrated reporting format, and do they align with these important United Nations sustainability goals? So I hope you found this interesting. That brings my short presentation to an end. So thank you for listening and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Thank you for your time and waiting for your presentation. Thank you. It was really useful. So I will now go back to what Jeshkaran was supposed to present. So she was more keen in talking about how important the ESG could be. So when we talk about sustainability, it is really important that we need to understand how we govern those rules and regulations and how we make the companies work for the environment for sustainable future. So then the question is how this ESG model, existing ESG model, can be helpful in the post-COVID period. And as the previous speakers were talking about that, what we need to do after this crisis. So when we start recovering, what kind of activities we need to do. Yes, this is really important to understand how we can integrate the environmental issues, societal issues, and the governance issues. Because if you want to instruct the companies to do something without proper rules and regulations, you cannot ask them to do it. As Lee was saying, that as most of the rules and regulations were voluntary, the reporting was voluntary, then many companies were not following that because they think that it is voluntary. So what kind of benefit I'm going to get out of it? So we, the researchers, we, the informed community, we should make the business understand that if you inform more about your sustainable activities, if you do more for the economy, more for the society, then you will get financial benefit by doing this non-financial activities. So where is the link between financial and the non-financial aspects of any business? So it is really important for after the COVID or in the post or during the recovery period that the companies should think about how to integrate this society, like doing small, very small things. That recently we saw in the news that in Africa many elephants were dying. So what kind of, if we think about a pharmaceutical company or a research development wing, what kind of research development they are doing? Are they linked with the government? Are they thinking about the environmental impact? Are they trying to find out if there were any environmental issues that affected the longevity of this elephant community? So they have to do lots of things, and the companies are the main unit of the economy who can come forward to take all those initiatives. Then there is a huge importance of directors network, because we have found in the research that when the directors are communicating among themselves, they are getting enough information and they can help each other to get the important information to do something good for the society. And if there is a kind of herding among them, so if one director is doing and they are able to bring in financial benefit by doing these non-financial activities, then the question is, can they influence the other directors or other executives in the companies? Because the executives are the agents of the company and the shareholders are the principal of the company. So the principals always want the company to work for the benefit for all of them, or all the stakeholders. But on the other hand, very often the managers, the directors, they work only for themselves because they want to increase their earnings, they want to increase their salary compensation package, they want to work for their bonus, and they are more keen in meeting or beating the earnings target every year. So in doing so, sometimes they miss the objectives of sustainable growth. So it is really important to make them understand how that could be helpful. And in some of our research, we found that yes, directors network is really important, and they reduce the cost of sharing information. Because if you think that you want to do something sustainably and you want to gather more information, then this information is really costly. Like if you think about these young scholars who are working on this area, they are spending so much of their time, which time they can do another job and earn money, but they are not doing like that. They are spending their time to get out to bring to dig out more information about the requirement of the business. So if there is a good network among the directors, they can reduce the cost, they can process good information, they can influence each other, and they can do it at national and international level. And as the previous speakers were talking about investors, then we can attract more foreign investments, and we can bring in other investors from different parts of the world. And that can be done with a good network. So if you think that why you are attending these webinars, because you want to create network, you want to know what other people are doing. So what companies did during financial crisis? Now, why I'm talking about financial crisis? Because financial crisis was quite different from this COVID crisis. I completely agree on that. But that affected the economy a lot, the financial crisis. So how the companies managed to survive, and it is proved in the literature, in the academic literature and in research, that the companies who were doing good with the society, where they made other people feel like they are part of their business, they really managed to survive. And we can see a same trend during this COVID crisis and during the pandemic, that the companies who were closely working for the society, who were careful about the environment, they did really well during this pandemic compared to others who were not considering the ESG factors that well. And if you think about any tech companies, I know that tech companies are now, the government said that you are having too much power, so you have to reduce your power. But if you think about the pandemic time, when we all were at home, we need to get certain stuffs and the supply chain was breaking down in different places, it was the tech companies who helped us to deal with our day-to-day activities. And they gave us like until now we can see that we are still using internet, and the tech companies are helping us to reach each other, and we can process the information and the required activities, we can carry on with our activities. So what we did during the financial crisis is giving a good lesson to us, that what we can do after the crisis, and what can companies do to prepare for recent changes. Yes, this is the right time to start thinking that how we will cope with those changes. And I have seen many companies, we are working with many small companies as well as medium-sized companies to help them to keep going, and they are doing great job. Like they are doing survey to understand what their customers need, because they already got the customer base, so they knew who are my customers. And now if they knew that, okay, my customer need a high-speed internet in certain area, now it might not be possible to provide that high-speed internet in the rural parts. So what other things we can do? Can we use some AI-based technologies? Can we use some cloud computing? So they are trying to find out different ways of dealing with the problems the customers, the other stakeholders are having in the society. And in doing so, we the researchers can help them to do it in a sustainable manner, so that in future, even if we encounter with similar type or a different type of crisis, they can live or sustain for a long time. So that is the purpose, that you have to do it now without sacrificing any benefits of the current stakeholders, and you have to keep on doing for the future generation. So then I was trying to think what is happening in India. So as per CMI, that rise in unemployment rate was 23.4% by April 2020. So it went too high now. So I don't want to show that dangerous figure now. So, and 90% of workforce in informal sector, they are suffering from job insecurity. So why I'm saying all those negative things? Because I'm trying to explain that these were the signals, these are the signal of a non-sustainable economic model. So it shouldn't be economy model, it should be economic model. Sorry for that. So, and then as per PLFS, that 70% self-employed never recruit anyone. So they are doing everything by themselves, and 95% is in informal, unorganized sector. I know there were lots of discussions around what the government is trying to do for the daily wage workers, and there is a huge portion in the economy who earn every day, and so they belong to this unorganized sector. So if 95% is in informal unorganized sector, then you can understand it's very hard for the government to understand who are they, what to do, because they don't have enough information about that. And this is completely, I'm talking about Indian economy. Now, why I'm talking about these things? Because it is now the time to understand what went wrong and what can be done for future. So to reduce this number from 95 to say bring it to 60%, we really need to work hard. And we have to, we researchers, we who are quite advanced with technology, or we got the proper knowledge, we have to find out how we can reduce this number. So to do that, we have to take the initiative to learn more about who are those informal, who belongs to this informal sector, and what are their needs, what kind of activities they are doing. Can we merge them with some other small companies? In that way, the small company will be benefited and the daily wage workers would also be benefited. And then as we are talking about development in automobile sector, and there we found that many people are predicting by 2021 or 2022, India will see a progress in that area. How they are expecting, why they are expecting this? Because they think there would be more demand for individual cars, and there would be more electronic vehicles. And by doing those things, people will, by using those things, people will be able to travel by themselves instead of stop sharing the public transport among themselves. So is there any scope that we can help the very small number of people, or a portion of the whole population, who can be associated with the production, who can be associated with the selling activities, who can be associated with developing small units? Like in the rural area, if we try to establish a small farmhouse where we educate some people that, see, if you use this type of vehicles, you would be benefited. So these are the different ways we have to think forward, and the companies needs to take a lead, especially the big companies. And as Lee was mentioning, that they need to find out sustainable model, just not for the benefit of getting some benefit. They will mention that, okay, we are doing some sustainable activities. No, they have to do it really for the society. And this type of small companies, if they can come up with producing, manufacturing some small parts of these electronic vehicles, or if they could think that how we can change the charging system, like government then can play an important role, and the directors can share those information among themselves, create a lobby, and then go to the government and say that, see, these things can be done. I'm not sure, I have not seen by myself, but I heard that in Germany, that in some places they are making a trial by putting some cables below the street, so that whenever a car, electronic car, is passing through that road, they are getting automatically getting charged in their car. So these type of initiatives, if the big companies can do those things, and if they, and in this way we can reduce the pollution to a great extent. And even if India is densely populated, if we have more cars, if we have less pollution, we can do developments in our trafficking system, and which is possible, because there are other countries which are also very populated, but they are doing all those advancements, and in this way we can build up a sustainable model for future. So what are the steps taken before COVID? So we were doing really good in different sectors, and like Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan package was there. The National Food Security Act was helping the agricultural sector a lot. And then there were voluntary guidelines on corporate social responsibility in 2009, issued by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And then there were national voluntary guidelines. And in 2012, we have seen that BRR, the Business Responsibility Report, which was disclosed by SAB and said that every company needs to report about those things. And in 2019, companies need to additionally deposit the unspent amount in a separate account. So if they could create more profit by taking care of the society, then we observed that the companies were able to save a lot of money. And when the companies are saving lots of money, means they are applying back the profit, which they can use it for in the next year for the benefit of the economy, or for the benefit of their business, as well as for the economy. And then we got section 166, where every employees, community and environment, how the directors are taking care of them. Like now these days we are hearing about gender equality, then age equality, and how they're taking care of the community. Are they building up any parks for the community children? And is there any kind of small place where the elderly people can go and spend their evening there? So these are the things they are doing for the community, because if you go to the shopping center and buy certain food items and other daily necessity products, it is not your ultimate happiness. Your ultimate happiness is when you are happy, where you are staying, what you are doing. So the directors, the companies need to really take care of their employees, community and environment a lot. And many companies are doing that. Now more than 1,000 companies already started reporting about their CSR. But as Lee said, that these are all voluntary. So we have to find out that how the directors can take an initiative of the big companies, how they can work with the researchers like us, how we can work with the policymakers. So if we all can come together, and we can try to follow the UN sustainable goals, and whatever activities businesses are doing, if they collaborate with researchers and the policymakers to see how they can achieve the sustainable goal, then at least one of them, and it might not be possible to achieve all the goals. So it would be really great for the economy, for the environment, and we all can see a sustainable future. So companies becoming sustainable, they are more if they are more concerned about biodiversity issues, that how I will maintain the greenery around my manufacturing unit, and other things like how we can introduce more solar panels, how we can use like wind energy or other energies, and instead of digging out all the coals from the coal mines. And in this way they can develop a sustainable model which we all can follow. So to finish our talk, I would like to focus more on what steps need to be taken during COVID-19 and in the recovery period. So we have already seen some steps taken, like Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan was started in May 2020, and where the main purpose, I know there are lots of discussion around this package, but I would strongly recommend people to think positively. And if we can think positively, how we can be Atmanirbhar means self-dependent, and we stop depending on other countries. So whatever we are doing for our own people. And then yes, if we do well, then we can produce more without disturbing our environment, without disturbing our animal planets, and then we can save some products which we can do international trading with those products. And then there were more focus on importance of local people. So instead of thinking about a very big picture about whole India, you can't make changes for the whole country, you can't bring in lots of changes for the whole nation. So you have to think locally, that what I can do locally. If I go out and see, okay, people are throwing out litters on the river bank side, I can like spend half an hour every day in the morning when I go for the morning walk. I will take all those things and I will put it in the bin. So you are actually, as a stakeholder, you are contributing to the society. And if you do like this, when you go at your workplace, you will still remember that what you did in the morning, so you will keep on following the same thing. So you are helping your company to be more sustainable. And if in your company, if you see that people are not shutting off their laptop or computers when they leave, you can create that atmosphere, you can create that awareness in your company. And then we found that in, I think in Croatia or somewhere, I found a system where they put the beside the canteen, they put the recycling system, where they kept different buckets, and it is run by one electronic belt. And whenever you are putting, say you want to put a glass material, and by mistake you are putting it in the plastic, that will sort it out, and that will help you to put that in the right place so that it can go for a proper recycling. So there are many ways of doing it, and these things doesn't need big investment, these things doesn't need big machines or something. So many things can be done locally. And the local government, you can take the initiative. If you are related with the local policymakers, go and talk to them, give them the proposal. If you always think that they will provide you the model, then that's not right, because sometimes you have to take the initiative to solve your problem, because that is also creating problem to you. And then the SBI expanded YONO scheme, that you only need one, which I knew that there were lots of criticism about this, that there are many people in the rural part who cannot access to internet, who doesn't know how to use internet. But this is really important now, because if you think previously, when we go to SBI or any other banks, we have to stand there for a long time to make any payment or to withdraw some money. But now we can, as most of us are doing paperless transactions, we can do it very quickly. And you would not believe that to run this system, there are so many small companies, so many people getting job to support this whole system. So it is not taking away our job. So there is always a question that if we bring in more artificial intelligence or this type of things, advanced technology, that will take our job. But you would not believe that there are loads of jobs in the market related to AI and advanced technology. So I found SBI's initiative is really good. And I was going through one of the interviews with the head of the SBI, and he was saying very positive, he was giving positive thoughts that how they are planning to do it at interior sector. And if you think about the pandemic time, we all were sitting at home, but we were not in trouble to do banking transactions. So if we would not do this thing before, and he was saying that the pandemic helped them to test the system properly at a wider scale. Previously they were doing it, but many people were not accepting, they were still going to the bank to do the financial transactions. But now, as people are not allowed to go out, then they started applying it, and which helped them to understand what are the main problems, how to solve that. And they are now collaborating with different investors, different young generation, elderly generation, to understand what are those problems and how to solve that. And I'm pretty sure they would come up with a very good system in near future. And then if you start complaining about, okay, the system was down, I cannot do that, it can happen with anyone anytime. So that is also helping us to be quite resilient. And then if something goes wrong, we cannot keep on sitting in one place, because this time pandemic happened in every country, but it could be in future that something is happening in, say, Asian countries only or European countries only. But because of those type of future events which we don't know, and it's quite uncertain, we are not sure that we cannot keep quiet, and we cannot sit at home without doing any kind of transaction. So even if there is a crisis, we can still carry on with our economic activities. That is the main motive of sustainability. And then we can keep on carrying on doing all those things, and without any disturbance. Understanding about problems associated with linear economy. So linear economy means, say, a single time using plastic. So this type of thing shouldn't be there. So this pandemic helped us to understand that this is not the right way. We have to think how to recycle. We have to think how to reuse certain things. So India has announced plans to spur small and medium businesses as part of $266 billion economic package, which is a really good amount. And I know that many people said, oh, it's not sufficient, there are so many small and medium businesses. But if you think that instead of having nothing, if you have something, and if you could motivate the small and medium businesses to use those loan package money, and then start doing, not to stop their activities, or helping them to think in a little bit different manner, so that they can then bring in lots of very small businesses or daily wage workers and other people in need in this whole model, and they can keep on moving forward. And there was an emergency credit line of collateral free loan worth of $40 billion to resume business activity and safeguard jobs. So this is collateral free loans, means if even if you fail, then the bank will not take away your house or your property. So it is a good starting point. Instead of doing nothing, it is always better to do something that might bring in, because the future is uncertain, we never know what is going to happen. So I would think that in future, if we think for the coming days, if we start thinking about the circular economy, where we can reuse and do sustainable activities, then we can focus more on local development, and we use the sustainable approach, and there is a proper coordination between business policymakers and researchers. And if we start creating innovation hub, where we do kind of simulation to see take a small case, solve that, and then start thinking what could be the problem if we try to apply at a larger scale. And then we need to mentoring each other, that if you don't have that knowledge, then ask around, ask at other partners that can you help us to get this information. And then we can do lots of mergers and acquisition in the food industry, fashion, beauty, restaurants, like the very small restaurants. If you think about very street side restaurants, so they are very small restaurants, and most of them survived during this pandemic, and like they survived somehow, or they stopped. So if they stop, then the point is we have to take the initiative to help them to start again. And to start again, we can tell them, okay, if you are specialized in one type of product, if you are very good in one type of food item, keep doing that, and give them small money to help them to do that. And that can be done at local level, and for that you don't need to go at national level. So you can do that, and then when they produce those products, then, or they cook or they prepare those items, then you take the initiative, who got a little bit of more money compared to that restaurant owner. You take that and you give it to a little bit medium-sized restaurant, and then medium-sized restaurant can be in touch with the big restaurant chain, where they can send all those food items. So there are different ways. And if you think about these beauty salons or the fashion industries, we have lots of jute products, and we always thought in one direction that okay, jute product, we can do these things. Did we try to understand that if we mix something with jute, can we make more durable clothings, or can we use it for other accessories? And these type of things can be done by big companies. So big companies is ticking one box that they are working for the society, because for the environment they are using the environmental product without wasting it. And on the other hand, the companies who can sell those products, they can recruit so many sellers, and they can salesperson, and they can also recruit administrative people and other people. So that could be a big company. Then that big company is again working with medium and small companies, where they are directly linked with the farmers, or the farmhouses where they are producing this jute. So these type of things, we have to understand that India is mainly agricultural based until now. So instead of thinking more about how to compete with China, we need to think how, what we can learn from China, that how they developed. It's not only the policy changes, it's not only the some typical what do you say, the industrial culture, but they change the awareness among people, that see, if you want to develop, if you want to see a better life, you have to do all those things. So if we start creating that awareness among our people, I'm pretty sure that we can advance a lot in future. Thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Monomita and her associates. We are very grateful to you. And basically, this is the time to address our inquisitive participants. So we have a question from Dr. Indira Shamazdar Gangopadhyay, that how does this COVID-19 pandemic affects the employability of the migrant laborers globally?
Okay.
How does this COVID-19 pandemic affects the employability of the migrant laborers globally?
Okay, thank you for this question. Yeah, it's affected globally, and all the migrants around the globe are affected. But there are different schemes of helping them, and in some countries the schemes are really good. In some countries these are not sufficient. Like in the UK, what they did, the Prime Minister, this is a summertime when there are lots of fruits around, and they need lots of migrants to do the fruit picking and from the fields, and it is a laborious work to do. And what he said in one of his briefings, that if you are in the country, you are not able to go back to your home country, then why don't you engage yourself in these firms to do the picking done for the whole economy? In that way you can earn some money, and in that way you can help the firms to grow. So I think we have to find out different ways of doing it. In India, when these people cannot go back to their workplace again, so we have to think, can we create some job opportunities, small opportunities in their area? Like I work on one kind of grass called vetiver, which is easily we can use that for restoration of the coastal area, so river or sea side. So for this, if we could use the laborers who are not having enough work to do now, and give them small amount of money, because once they can sell those products, this grass, then the government can pay them, like for if each saplings they get 3 rupees or so. So if we can motivate these migrants to do all those things, then we are saving the economy, because we are able to pay them whatever they are doing. We can reduce the unemployment rate, and on the other hand, we are saving the coastal areas, so we are taking care of the environment. So with one strategy, we are helping two components of the economy, of the environment. So I think this type of activities could reduce the unemployment a lot.
Thank you. And we have one last question from our very own student, Sriporna Mukherjee of our college. That is, how Pradhan Mantri Fashal Bima Yojana and JAM Trinity be helpful for economic growth?
Yeah, and like how you will use that. That is the point, that when these schemes are prepared by the Prime Minister and his associates, so the main purpose is for the development of the whole economy. Now, you as an economist, you can take the lead to find out certain areas where you can apply the scheme very nicely. So we, the people who knew what are the problems, if we don't know, then we have to find out. And then, because when they are introducing these rules or packages, they are doing it for the whole country, and they might not know exactly what is the requirement in your area, because they are seeing a bigger picture. But you can work at micro level to find out how to apply that model in your area for the development of your area. And be very sure that if you are applying that properly, then you are making development in your small area, and the people from that area can benefit other people in a little bit bigger area. So in this chain wise, you are making a development for the whole economy. So I would strongly recommend that this type of packages needs to be utilized by every unit, every household and every unit of the economy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nondi. We really apologize for taking very much time from your busy schedule. Thank you again. And may I now request Dr. Debjani Mitro, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to propose our vote of thanks. Thank you. Over to you, Debjani Di.
Thank you, Devolina. Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, friends. Honorable Principal Madam, respected resource persons, IQAC Coordinator Madam, organizing committee members of 2 days international webinars on biodiversity and sustainable development in human welfare, distinguished guests, delegates, participants, my dear colleagues and students. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a new normal way of vote of thanks on this occasion. First of all, I, on behalf of Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Bijoy Krishna Girls College, Howrah, West Bengal, India, propose the vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this webinar such a resounding success. First of all, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to our speakers for both the days, Professor Pratap Kumar Padhi, Professor Konika Chatterjee, Dr. Barbara Smith, Professor Ajitavo Rai Chaudhuri, Dr. A.K. Sanyal, Dr. Monomita Nondi, Ms. Lee Robert, and Ms. Jaskaran Kaur for their erudite and thought-provoking speech on different aspects of biodiversity and sustainability, like role of biodiversity in human welfare, rethinking for a circular economy for business education, employment sustainability, practical application of biodiversity, manufacturing sector's situation in this COVID era and their sustainability, and sustainability for common man, as well as corporate role to maintain biodiversity, etc. A big thank you to all the participants for their patience listening and active participation. I would like to express our profound gratitude and thanks to all the external and internal members of governing body and internal quality assurance cell of Bijoy Krishna Girls College, Howrah, for their wholehearted support. A big thank you to our ever enthusiastic, energetic Principal Madam, Dr. Ruma Bhattacharya, for your active support and positive inspiration. Thank you, Madam. Last but not least, this program will not be success except our IQSC coordinator, Madam Dr. Sheta Guru, for her active participation and valuable suggestion. We can do this type of 2 days webinar. Thank you, Madam. And thanks to the conveners and also all the committee members of this webinar. Thank you very much for your patience, listening and participation. Thank you very much. And one announcement for the participants, already in the chat box, the feedback link already been circulated, and after 10 to 15 days you will get your e-certificate. So be patient and be tuned with us. Thank you very much. Hello. Hello.
Shitadi or Principal Madam, are you just make a formal
should I
announcement?
end? Should I end?
Just make a formal announcement.
Yes. Shwetadi.
Okay.
Over to Shwetadi.
Thank you, everybody, all speakers, participants, and our conveners, Dr. Papia Ghosh and Vidyadhar Mondal. I express my sincere thanks to all of you. With this, we end our today's international webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm stopping this.